Well, good afternoon. My name is Becky Metcalf, and on behalf of Design Centre Chelsea Harbour, a very, very warm welcome to our WOW Talks. Now, these talks have been devised to coincide with WOW House, and I hope that lots of people have already been in to our biggest project that we've ever done at the Design Centre. It's rather magnificent. First, a little bit of housekeeping. We're recording the session today, so if I could ask you to turn off your phones, that would be so kind. Well, WOW House has really generated so much amazing response, and not least by two exceptional rooms, the study and the bedroom, designed by Joanna Plant and Stephanie Barber Mendoza. And we're absolutely thrilled that they've battled through all sorts of funny travel and traffic and goodness knows what else to be with us here today. Who better to speak to them than Kate Freud? Kate has fantastically stepped in. Samantha Scott Jeffries has got stuck in the Cotswolds, so she's been completely brilliant, stepped into the breach and is going to moderate the session today. And we're so thrilled that this session is with the English Home. Who better to talk about colour and pattern? I think we should give them a very warm welcome.
Well, it's lovely to be here with Stephanie and Joanna to talk about how to use colour and pattern to transform a room. Now, Joanna, let's begin with you. So you had one star fabric from Tissu de Laine, which was the starting point for your room. Would you mind talking to us a bit about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's the yellow one on the left-hand side with the sort of rose print at the bottom. That was the one that I started with simply because I'd wanted to use it for ages and hadn't had the chance. And I went into Tissus de Laine and Helen said, okay, just choose anything. So I thought, right, that's going to be the starting point.
And is yellow a colour that you would have usually chosen for a bedroom, or was it a bit of a departure? Did you say you felt like it was sort of dopamine, the colour yellow, and
a bit,
very
yes,
joyful.
Dopamine for the eyes.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't used that much yellow fabric. I've used yellow paint a fair amount. But I thought that this was such a sort of cheerful, sunny colour, and also the room had no natural light. I mean, those WOW House rooms downstairs have no real natural light, so there was that element to think about from the outset.
Yes, and you very cleverly have made it cosy and warm rather than cool, and I think that's a clever thing to do. I think it's a bold choice to use yellow, isn't it?
I know, it hasn't been a very popular colour for a long time, but I think I see it emerging here and there.
And Stephanie, you're known for bringing concepts to life in your work. Tell us how Queen's 1974 hit Killer Queen was the inspiration for your study.
I come from the hospitality background, and we tend to use a narrative to create the concept. So to create any sort of project. So for this in particular, I wanted to have a muse, somebody I was designing this room for, and I'm really passionate about music. I get super inspired by music, and I've been a big fan of Freddie Mercury for a long time. So listening to the Killer Queen song, I thought it's actually pretty perfect. She could be our muse for this study and work with that.
You could definitely have some fun with that, yeah.
Definitely.
And what was the first element that you installed when you decided on the concept, and why did you choose that?
The first thing was the floor. I saw this incredible sample at Sterling Studios, who actually did the floor. And it wasn't used for a floor, but I thought it was so beautiful, and it would be a really great idea to use it as a floor, because it's not something I have seen before, and I thought to have something different or a different take on or create something more unexpected on using different materials that are perhaps less used.
Yes. Yeah. Can I just say, for the record, these are rolling slides that we've got going in the background. These are some of Joanna's own designs, and you'll see some of Stephanie's own designs, and their rooms in the Wow House as well, just in case you're trying to figure out what's going on there. Joanna, how did you develop the layered and colour palette and mix of different scales and patterns when you were designing your room in the Wow House?
I started with the fabrics. Obviously, they're the kind of main event in that room in many ways. And I just threw them around on the table, sort of getting big ones, little ones, the stripes. There were 2 stripes in there. There are 9 patterns overall, which might seem quite a lot in a relatively small room, but actually, because they all are quite sort of tonally matched, they sit together very harmoniously. And then we recolored 2 of the elements. The wallpaper was recolored, and the fabric, the outer fabric on the bed was recolored, so that the tones really did talk to each other.
Because it certainly doesn't feel like that many different patterns in there. It's very cleverly done. And Stephanie, how did you balance the bold choices that you made in your study to ensure that it reflected your theme and the adventurous life of the Killer Queen, but was also cozy and inviting as a space to use?
I guess by layering. We wanted to create a layered look because the Killer Queen is someone who maybe had traveled a lot and had collected things over time. So we wanted to show that those things that were new, but with lots of things that were collected and that were old, and I guess you balance it by putting things together. You just look. It's a bit of an intuition as well, and
it's definitely a knack. Yes. And can you tell us about some of the amazing pieces of art and the wall hangings you have in the study?
Yes. So we have a tapestry that is from Tyson, but it's like an old Aubusson tapestry, which you can. I think it was so important to have something antique, like a large piece. Also, I had a lot of hard surfaces, like the metal floor, and everything else was hard. So by covering one wall with a tapestry, it adds a bit of softness to it, and art is so important in rooms. It just gives you a feeling. It makes you, it creates a feeling in you by looking at art. Perhaps that wasn't your question, but
no, it sort of adds to the sort of history and the feel of the room. It's very clever. And you've both used stripes in your scheme. Can you tell us, Joanna, about the role that stripes play in your room?
Well, there are 2 stripes, both on the bed. They sit sort of next to each other. One's quite a sort of strict French kind of stripe. The other one is a little bit more floral and jazzy. Stripes are sort of pattern without pattern, so they add more layers of pattern, but perhaps not in an overwhelming way, and they add a little bit of sharpness, which I really like. There's a little bit of a nod to a kind of French Provençal feel. Yeah, they just seem to kind of work for me.
And if we were using them in our own homes, can you give any tips to us about how to actually, a little or a lot in your own home?
Well, first of all, I think men respond quite well to stripes. So whereas lots of men are a bit pattern averse and they immediately kind of go to florals and think, oh, God, no, it's too much for me. So stripes work very well in that regard. I think there's sort of some kind of hard wiring about pajamas or something. I don't know. But they, if you take a plain and then you put a stripe with it and then perhaps a larger pattern fabric and a little pattern fabric, then you've got 4 things right there, and that's a scheme. The beginnings of one for me, anyway.
And you have got in your room your extraordinary curtains with the I don't know what you would call it, the pelmet. With the padded pelmet.
Yes.
Can you tell us how you've used the stripes to enhance your room?
I also like using stripes in every scheme pretty much, because I think a stripe is really a timeless pattern, and you can have it. You can make it modern or more traditional, depending on the type of stripe and the color and all sorts of things. But I think, like Joanna said, it is almost like something you always have add on to a scheme. And for this room, I wanted to have it around at the entrance and as curtains. The pelmet is a bit like a turban, I guess, and it was sort of like a feeling, a theatrical feeling of entering the room and exiting as well. It's a bit, you can close them as well, and it's a separation from the other room. It's almost like you were entering into a different space, and that was a good way to separate the two areas.
Yeah, it's got this sort of circus feel of, going into a space you're not sure what to expect in. And an amazing curtain maker. I mean, next level curtains there.
John Rhodes.
So who was it?
John Rhodes.
John Rhodes, okay. And both of you decided to decorate the ceiling, or as I found out today, it's called the fifth wall, which I should probably have known. But what made you decide to do that, Joanna?
A little bit to do with acoustics. It's very softening to have the fabric up there. But actually, mostly, I think ceilings are quite underused as an element of the scheme. They're such a big area. To ignore it is a missed opportunity. So it was another opportunity for a bit more pattern, because, why not? I just liked the softness, that sort of gauzy, it's that printed, little pattern printed on a sort of thin foil, and it did give that lovely sort of soft, gauzy feel.
And can you talk about how the fabric was hung leading up to the light?
Yeah, so we thought about doing a proper sort of full-on tented ceiling, which takes an awful lot of fabric. So we reined it back a bit, but where the light is hung, we sort of went up to it, so you get a little bit of a sort of tented feel.
You can actually see it on this picture here.
Yeah, it just pulls up a bit. It just added a little bit more verticality to the room, which is always a good thing. Yes, and then I don't know if anyone's noticed, but there's a sort of ribbon trim around the whole thing, separating the walls and the ceiling, which is kind of a device to deal with that transition. So if the wallpaper doesn't get quite a straight line, you just put the trim over. But also, I like that kind of sharp delineation. It's around the skirting, around doors as well.
That's very clever. And why did you decide to decorate your ceiling?
Ceilings are important because it's such a large.
You can see this here.
Oh yes, it's such a large area as well as your floor. So, like Joanna said, it can be forgotten because it's a large space. You can actually use to add on to the space something different. Ceilings don't need to be wide. In this case, I wanted to add a little bit of warmth because the color palette, green is a cooler color, and I think I wanted to add a bit of warmth with the ceiling and the light reflecting on this color. It actually makes it look very warm and inviting.
And then you pick it up in the chair and the lamp.
Exactly, and it's an opportunity to then pick it up
play with some more
in
colour.
other ways.
And this is the amazing piece of art Stephanie was talking about earlier, which you should, if you can, have a close look at. It's very beautiful. Okay, so both schemes are very layered in terms of materials, which we've already touched on, but you've also used furniture and accessories and objects to add to that layering. Stephanie, what did you want to add to what did you want to achieve by adding all of the different layers to your room?
To make it feel warm and lived in. And the reflection of the Killer Queen collecting things, so it needed to have that.
So things like the antique tapestry and juxtaposed with the shiny metal floor, that was all part of it as well?
Yes, I think it's important to use different materials in a room to make it feel more well, I guess to have a better feel for the room, it's important to have all sorts of different materials. I think your metals, your fabric, you need to have softness, sharpness, and warmth. So I think that's why it's you have to contrast one thing with the other. Like I said, everything felt so hard. So having this big wall of tapestry, that adds a lot of warmth and it makes it feel less hard. The same with the flowers, I guess, and the fact that the ceiling is silk. That's also a softness to the space.
There's a sort of sense of the exotic and eclectic, all these eclectic finds that, you know, you can imagine the Killer Queen would be a traveller and have seen the world and cherry-picked all these different things where she went. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And Joanna, you said that you wanted to use more robust antiques to sort of juxtapose the prettiness and the delicateness of the fabrics. And you also talked about, can you also touch on the bed and how, well, I'll let you tell us what you call the bed in the bedroom.
Bed is I guess, the star of the show.
Yeah.
You know, she's right there in the middle of the room, and a bedroom's got to be about the bed.
Yeah.
The four-poster gives that great verticality, which I think is always an element to hold in your mind about how to bring the space up. The bed is iron. It's Spanish 1920s. So that was sort of the starting point. As Stephanie said, once you've got that material, it's kind of balancing the prettiness of the scheme. So right there, we're doing something quite robust and gutsy. So then the metal of that then led on to the garden table. The garden table spoke a little bit to the trellis wallpaper. So we had a nod to a garden room. And then the bookcases were just a sort of mad bit of super scale. They're 3 meters high, so they really go right up to the ceiling. But I wanted to show how you can use quite sort of big antique furniture in quite a pretty room and make it work. Also, we always scale up, always go bigger, not smaller. There's nothing worse than mimsy furniture.
Why is that? Just...
I think you want to sort of fill the space. You want to make it look like you meant it. It just means, I don't know, that's what makes a scheme successful furniture-wise. It's definitely up, always.
So the bookshelves you spoke of, those weren't made bespoke?
No.
You bought them? Gosh.
Yes. Yeah.
And then lined them?
And then we lined the back of the glass sections of the doors with fabric just to soften it a little bit.
And that's the same fabric
It's the same fabric that's on the lampshades.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a Decor Baba.
Very, beautiful. And where would you go for those sorts of robust antiques, the sort of indoor, outdoor furniture, those sort of heavier pieces?
Well, I think it's good to go to the country dealers. I think there are places like Lawford's in Tetbury. There's a very good online resource called the Decorative Collective, and both of them actually have a lot of dealers all showing in one place. So if you type in the search button iron bed, if any of the dealers that they represent have an iron bed, it will come up. So if you're looking for something but you don't know quite what you're looking for, that's a really good place to start.
That's a good tip. Thank you. And how do you think your rooms in the Wow House reflect your own use of colour and pattern in the work that you do generally? Stephanie, what would you say?
I definitely use a lot of color and pattern in my work because I don't know, I think it makes you happier, and you can use, there's so many different variations of color and pattern, and I think they can fit in completely different scenarios. It's just which type you use for what. For example, this study, it's almost dark, and I did a project in Miami, and it's quite bright, and the fabrics are quite light, and the type of fabrics are also very different. They have pattern, but in a different way. Yeah.
And what about you, Joanna?
Remind me the question.
How does your wow room reflect the way that you use colour and pattern in your general style as an interior designer?
Gosh, I mean, I just love using pattern. I just think, you know, it just brings something to a room that a plain. I mean, I think if you've got an architecturally beautiful room that just speaks all by itself, then great, just paint it white and enjoy it, and it's lovely. But actually, in England, we have a very cool northern light. You know, the weather is often ghastly. And these sorts of rooms where you have, like the wow room, sort of warmth and pattern, it gives you a feeling of being enveloped. And I think it was John Fowler who said it takes an awful lot of busyness to make a room feel restful. And actually, I think that's what's going on in that room.
Yeah, that's very true. And it sort of brings a joyfulness that perhaps as you say, the English weather might not always bring.
Yeah.
And are there any specific paint colours or fabrics or combinations that you find yourself returning to create a particular mood for your clients? I mean, it sounds, Stephanie, like your work is for quite sort of joyful and projects in Miami. And can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, I mean, I like using most colors, so that's gonna be hard. I guess blue and green always make it into different tones of it, but I think green and blue and perhaps tones of coral or red or orange somewhere.
So you would always mix the cooler with the warmer? I
guess it's about that, mixing the cooler with the warmer and
okay.
Yeah, the rainbow.
And anything's possible.
Yeah.
And what about you, Joanna?
It's interesting. I mean, we always do paint colours last. So we do the fabrics first, and then I'll pull a paint colour out and then use that on the woodwork elements, the skirtings and doors and so forth. So that's sort of how we do it. Often I quite like a sort of weird colour for the woodwork. I always think it should be toned down. I much prefer going that way rather than just sort of a white trim. I think it sort of looks a bit like primer. It doesn't seem finished to me. So in the wow room, we used a really weird colour that's a sort of potted meat colour, as I describe it. But it's actually, I just pulled it out of one of the fabrics, and it's just got a nice kind of recessive. Your eye doesn't jump to it. It's just sort of tonally.
It's almost browny.
It's brownish, yeah. It's a brownish pink. It's a bit grim, but I really like it.
We wouldn't call it the brown bedroom. The yellow bedroom.
No, and it's funny, people think of the room as being yellow, but actually there's a hell of a lot of brown in there. And I know that that's a deeply unpopular colour, but I think it's actually the thing that's making that room feel very, very soft.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wouldn't have noticed the brown at all. Very interesting. And you were saying, Joanna, as well, when you've had your 9 fabrics, or when you're doing any of your schemes, it's very difficult then to sort of imagine what they will all look like on a larger scale. So you have to really sort of visualize, and it's only when you see everything in context, you know, the bedspread and the...
Yeah, it's always a pleasant surprise when we pull it off.
Are there any tips for would you choose a bolder pattern for a specific thing, or a smaller print for, or how would you do it?
It's more about what's going on in the room. I mean, I love small repeat things I love that kind of backstairs thing. So I would use small repeats in sort of stairways and corridors and bathrooms or something. But then equally, that room that keeps flashing up is my own bedroom, where the wallpaper goes right up and over the ceiling. You know, I mean, I love a big splashy pattern too.
So what does that achieve by going all the way across?
Well, that came about because I couldn't hang pictures because there's not one flat wall. And I just had this sort of painted room, and it was like, God, I can't do anything here. So yeah, I just went all over, which I really love. I mean, it's a particular look, the sort of more and even a bit more, but that's what we went for.
And have you had it for a long time like that? Or
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, and I keep adding yet more. So yeah,
great. What colours or patterns are you most excited about using next in your work? And what sort of colour palettes feel right now for English homes? Stephanie, over to you.
Well, I've been excited to use a bit of lavender or this kind of lilac color.
Yeah.
I haven't managed to do it yet. Oh no, it's not true. I'm using it for a project that we're working on at the moment.
And how are you using it in that project?
It's going on the curtains. There's like an open plan living room and kitchen and dining room, and we're using it on the curtains, and then there's a little bit on a rug, and yes, so it's only in a couple of places, but it's a color I funnily enough never used, and I think it's worth a shot.
Very pretty. And what about you, Joanna, apart from the brown?
well, I'm sort of really into these sort of weird potted meat colours, which sounds so classy, doesn't it? But it's this sort of kind of brownish, greyish pink. I'm really excited to use it on a lot of woodwork, which is going to be a bit of a challenge. I'm going to have a brave client that's going to, but I quite like that. I mean, there's a very good Edward Bulmer paint colour, wall colour that I'm going to use that's sort of quite a strong turquoisey blue. And then I'm going to do all the woodwork in this weird greyish pink. And I mean, you know, let's see, might not work.
We look forward to seeing that.
Watch this
so
space.
You do need a brave client.
Yeah. Yes. But I mean, paint, I think, is just the place to sort of do that. You can bring such a lot of personality and atmosphere to a room with colour. I'm so glad we're not doing kind of grey walls anymore.
Yes, I agree.
Moved past that,
absolutely. Thankfully. Now, does anybody have any questions at all for Joanna or Stephanie? Oh, we need a microphone.
Just wondering, what was it like working without a client when you were working on the Wow House? How did it feel to have kind of complete creative freedom?
Stephanie? I mean, I have to say it was really great. Mostly because sometimes it's the little things that get diluted. I mean, we love our clients, don't get me wrong, but sometimes they'll go, oh, well, I'm not sure about this little element or that, and they start to kind of try and remove things. And it's always, for us, it's a bit like, yeah, but that's where the magic is. And when you start to pick away at a scheme and dilute it, it just falls a little bit flat. So to be able to push into this really quite strongly and go further in and in on that scheme was just actually heaven.
Would you usually use as many fabrics as, I mean, 9 seems like a lot.
I mean, you know, if I had, it's a budget thing really. I mean, it's a lot of fabric. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meters going in there. So it was a joy. I have to say it was heaven. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to say after that. I think you put it right. You put it very nicely. It's great to have been able to have carte blanche and do anything you wanted to do and just go for it for all the reasons you just said.
Oh, another one here. There's one at the front here.
Thank you. So first off, I do like stripes. I can confirm that is a thing.
Excellent, well done.
I do quite like. So I was just really interested to find out whereabouts you guys turn to for inspiration, both creatively and when you go into a room. Do you find you get a feel for it, or do you sort of look just to what the clients ask for? Or, yeah. be interesting.
Into a room when we're working with a client.
Yeah, when you first enter a room, do you instantly get a read for the space, or do you?
I mean, I don't know, but mostly it's about the client. It's the starting point is always what is the client, what are they doing in here? What's happening in here? How do they live in this room? What do they want from this room? How do they want to feel in this room? That's always the beginning. And then actually when they, even if their interiors vocabulary is quite limited, just the feeling of what they want to achieve, those words, you're like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to understand a little bit about what you might like or what we can give you that's going to enhance how you live in it. That's it. Yeah.
Yes, and then after that, I think looking in, I love books, and I look a lot at different books. I think I have a bit of an addiction on buying books. But I think that's always a great source of inspiration, you know.
Interior books or sort of pattern books, or
All of it. You know, like it depends what you are doing. Like it depends what you're trying to look for, but it's either interiors, but it could also be colors, it could be patterns, it could be art, it could be fashion. I mean, I think a lot of these different sides of the creative world actually have a lot to do with one another. I mean, I often have gotten inspired even by like a fashion show, the way they created the catwalk or the set designs or the clothes they're wearing, or like there's always like something you pick from everything, really. So the world's your oyster, really.
Hi. Any advice on avoiding being trend-led? I feel like it's so easy now. You think it's your own idea, but actually you're just absorbed by everything that's on Instagram, and suddenly everyone wants to have the same boucle sofa or whatever, which invariably you love at the time, and then in a few years' time, I mean, I did it with my first flat. It was just full of copper. That's what was in all the shops at the time. How do you get away from that and work out what you actually love?
Well, first of all, whenever I'm doing a scheme, I don't look at Instagram. I mean, I just ban myself because my eye becomes so oversaturated with images that I sort of forget what I like. So that's the first thing. I always go backwards. I try not to look too much about what people are doing now, because then it's just kind of regurgitating everything that's current, which is, I think, what you're alluding to. So I mean, like Stephanie, I've got a ridiculous amount of very sort of dogged old books that I've bought on eBay, and I go back to the old Colfax and Fowler books and the old decorating books and try and sort of see what it is they were doing, and that I find incredibly inspiring. And then the other thing is, whenever I go into a house where, you know, that thing where you go in a room and you think, God, this is a great room. This makes me feel this is fantastic. I just try really hard to analyze what it is, what's working, or why does it feel so good, or how did they do their curtain headings, or what was the depth of the sofa, or all these little things that when it comes to sort of doing your own house or pulling a scheme together, even, you know, when we've been doing it for years, it's just those things of like, what makes it work and what makes it feel good. And that's what I concentrate on, not what everyone else is doing.
Hello. I was quite intrigued by you saying that yellow had fallen out of favour, because when I went into your room, I felt it was very comforting. But I don't know if that was something that in the past, when I was growing up, I had a lot of yellow in my house. But why do you think it fell out of favour? And is it right for an English house? And do you have to be careful about the kind of shade you use in the light that we have here?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think in the 80s, there was a lot of that yellow, wasn't there? But it was It was a very sort of blue, it had a real blue undertone, really actually quite hard to live with and not terribly flattering. Whereas now I think the yellows that are coming through have got a sort of earthier undertone, so it's much softer to live with, and I think we are responding to that. But also I think there's just a lot of nostalgia currently. I really think, I mean, I feel sorry for the modernists out there because we're all looking back because I think it feels deeply comforting, and that's sort of what we want to feel right now, is very held by our rooms, not challenged so much. Would you agree?
Definitely.
I mean, yellow is a tricky colour for sure. I think that mustardy yellow is easier. Would you agree?
Yes, and also I guess that the lighter yellow, like sort of chicks yellow.
Yes, yes.
Like the
Sweet,
little chicks.
Yeah. Yes.
That yellow, I think, is also quite. It seems quite happy and warm as well.
Yeah, I think it's the happiness. You're right. I think that's
and it's a happy color. I think yellow is a happy color.
Yes, agreed.
The right tone.
Yes. What is it called? The chicks yellow.
Yes.
Yes, it must be called that. Chicks yellow.
There's a name for it. Like I don't know. What is it?
You've renamed it.
Yes.
It's perfect. Any more questions? We've got time for one or two more. Any more?
I was wondering if you'd ever had to persuade a client to kind of tone down the amount of pattern and colour that they wanted, or is it always you who's kind of pushing the envelope and getting them to go further?
Stephanie, you probably have much bolder clients than me. Do you have to rein it back? No.
Yes, I did actually
Did you?
once. Yes, once for the Antwerp project I'm doing. My client is very maximalist, and she's really great with pattern and color, but I think I might have pushed it too far at some point, and we reined it in a little bit. But you'll be surprised because it's still quite a lot of pattern and stuff. So it's the only occasion though. Usually, I think you have to push the clients a little bit to be braver. I think that's a 9 out of 10, perhaps. What do you think?
I agree. I think, and the way that we get away with it is to do it so that all the patterns are tonally speaking to each other, so it doesn't feel hugely overwhelming. It's not like it's not a sort of psychedelic scheme. You can, as you can see, use an awful lot of pattern, but it doesn't necessarily shout at you. So yeah, we do have to push, but actually I think when you sort of see it together, people go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, one more here. Have we got time for one more?
Yes,
Becky?
we do.
This lady at the back with.
Need to get my running shoes on.
Hi, Jo.
Hi.
When you get a project like this, can you hear me?
Yeah.
When you get a project like this, do you think, oh, goody, I can do it the way I like, I can use all the favourites that I've got, or do you have to tread carefully and look what other people are doing before you pull it together?
No, I never look at what other people are doing. That's where you completely lose your mojo. So no, it was just an opportunity to use everything that I wanted to. It was just absolute carte blanche. It was, I mean, being in the Tissues showroom honestly, it was like being a child in a sweet shop. It was heaven. Just, I'll have that and a bit more of that, and why not that too? Yeah, all of it, more and more.
What about you, Stephanie? I loved your room.
Thank you very much. No, I guess it's the same. I think it's better to trust yourself and do what speaks to you, and not look at other people. Especially in this case, it was an opportunity for each designer to express who we are as designers as well. So it has to be truth to yourself and no other.
We've probably got time for one last question. Oh, now all the hands are going up. Marvellous. Okay.
Do you think that for a design to be quintessentially English, it has to have pattern in it somewhere? Always? Or do you think, because we draw so much on history, and history is pattern, history is tapestry, history is art. You know, nowadays, if you were doing room set, quintessential English home style, is it layer on layer, or is it a nod, or to what extent does it need to have some English, some pattern in it?
I mean, I think I've seen some people's work that's very, very pared back and really beautiful for it. But then they might have incredible pictures that are rooted in the sort of more traditional idea of English decoration. And that, I think, can work just as well. But I mean, I always think for the really pared back scheme that's very sort of stripped away and very little or no pattern, you have to have some really stonking furniture to sort of pull it off, or fantastic pictures, which obviously some people do, and that's great. But I think for it to, in most people's houses, it's much easier. You know, we don't always have incredible plaster mouldings or fabulous architectural details. So this sort of patterned, layered approach it is quite sort of English, isn't it? And I think it just feels good. I think it goes back to the weather thing.
Well, I think it's more your question, but my interpretation of English homes, I think, is definitely more pattern, and I think that's the incredible thing about English homes, that they really do feel very warm, and there's a coziness to it, and an interest as well, and it feels comfortable and comforting. So as a foreigner, I guess, and a designer, for me, will be also. I kind of do feel that there needs to be that patterns going on, or that busyness that you mentioned.
Last question. Was it you? Of course, there we go.
I imagine your sort of visual portfolio is so important in getting new clients' projects. Do you find yourself turning down projects in fear that it's blurring kind of your aesthetic style? So if you were to take on a client that their brief was not necessarily your go-to style, do you find yourself turning them down in fear that it's kind of blurring the line?
I mean, I think there are enough people doing what we do for there to be a good fit. It's such a particular and quite intense relationship that you have to be speaking to each other. I mean, I think you have to want that the client has to want what we can give, and we have to feel that we can give them what they want. I mean, it's as simple as that. So I think, yeah, I mean, we would turn down jobs that didn't feel like it was going to feel good from the outset, because that's only going one way. Yeah, it's like put to beat or nothing. I don't know.
No, I agree, because otherwise you are not really inspired. You are not doing that job wholeheartedly, and I think it will reflect in the end that, and the client is not going to be happy either. So I think
there's enough people, right?
Yeah, you have to be wholeheartedly invested and share a vision together.
Well, I would like to say a big thank you to Stephanie and Joanna. It's been really interesting learning all of your insights into colour and pattern. If you haven't been into the warehouse yet, I would highly recommend it. It's really quite something. But thank you all so much for coming.
I'm going to add my thanks. Gosh, using pattern and colour is no mean feat, is it? It's simply amazing, Joanna, that you use 9 different patterns in your Wow House room, and it felt incredibly enveloping, and yet tonal and beautiful and calm and restorative. It really takes a lot of instinct. It takes commitment. It takes inspiration. I love the fact that Stephanie is looking at catwalks and amazing. I want to come around to your house and look at your library. There's so much to think about, isn't there? To get this dexterity with pattern and colour, the layering, the tones. But perhaps there's one thing that pattern and colour really does for us all. Stephanie says that colour just makes you happier. And I think it does. I think it really does. Thank you so much for sharing your designer secrets, your knowledge. It's been an absolute masterclass this afternoon. And I think we should give Joanna and Stephanie and the English Home and Kate a very big round of applause.